An isomorphism is when two structures have the same shape, such that those structures could not be distinguished on the basis of their shape alone. And isomorphism is very useful because it allows us to make analogies between different things. For instance, Morse code allows us to communicate with simple signals because there is an isomorphism between the signals and the alphabet. In this way, an isomorphism is like a mapping of meaning, and therefore, when we talk about one system, we are implicitly talking about the other system. Both systems have the same conceptual core. The structuralist movement argued that we can only understand the things that people do and think and feel through their interrelations within a broader system, that everything functions as a position in a structure. And in mathematical structuralism, isomorphic structures can be considered identical, insofar as mathematical objects simply are structures. Now, philosophical theories from practically every subject of discourse can be represented by this quadrant diagram, because we can categorize every philosophical concept with just two dichotomies, like the notion of mathematical sign. And since the possible solutions to very different problems, like what is the nature of reality or how do we know things, are governed by an isomorphic structure, everything we can say about one problem will correspond to something we could say about another. And furthermore, if two problems have the same structure, then they should also have the same solution. Graham Priest, in fact, uses this principle of uniform solution to argue that all similar self-referential paradoxes are really just one paradox, so that if a solution does not work for one of them, it cannot work for any of them. The different branches of philosophy can be thought of like different languages. They're all talking about the same reality, the same system. They're just talking about different dimensions or aspects of our ability to understand this system. And if a particular philosophical theory is an essential fragment of a broader structure of possible theories, then paraphilosophy, beyond particular philosophies, is a reasonable term to use to refer to this underlying structure which connects all philosophical thought. The structure differentiates four consistent aspects of our ability to understand our experience of the world. We can interpret experience as contact with mere sense data, with physical objects, with abstract forms, or as just consciousness itself. And each quadrant has an equivalent expression in every area of philosophy. And in every area of philosophy, the lower right quadrant expresses a unity of the subjective and objective factors, and this is because it refers to the phenomenon of self-reference. When considering knowledge, it refers to self-knowledge. When considering being, to self-being. With value, to self-value. With governance, to self-governance. This quadrant is the subject which is its own object. It is the consciousness of itself. And since the quadrants are not isolated things, but are aspects of a whole, aspects of our ability to conceive of reality, we know that if one aspect of the structure is self-referential, then the structure as a whole is self-referential, and self-similar, like a fractal. And if the lower right quadrant refers to self-consciousness, and if the entire structure is self-similar, then the entire structure is contained in self-consciousness. This is actually obvious, because any perspective we can have is a perspective of consciousness, and to interpret everything as consciousness is also one of the perspectives it can have. And since the entire structure is located in consciousness, self-consciousness cannot actually be found anywhere within the structure, It's just an endless tunnel of self-reference. But consciousness must be present, because without consciousness, there would be no perspectives. Consciousness is nowhere, but everything is in consciousness. Now, one of the biggest debates throughout the history of philosophy concerns whether the best source of knowledge comes from logical relations of ideas or empirical matters of fact. Generally speaking, if something is known through experience, then it does not rely on reason, and if something is known through reason, then it does not rely on experience. But self-knowledge relies on both. It is a logical and experiential necessity. It cannot be known only through reason, and it cannot be known only through experience, because the fact that experience always occurs to consciousness is precisely why self-knowledge is a logical prerequisite of any experience. Self-knowledge is, in a sense, doubly true, because if we can reflect on whether we are conscious, then we are necessarily conscious, and this fact is never separate from the actual experience of being conscious. To question whether there is consciousness is like asking the question, "Can I ask a question?" We cannot even complete the thought without already having provided the answer. It is simply beyond all doubt. So, if consciousness is self-justified, and if the structure of reason is in consciousness, then the structure is self-justified. That is, it's not just a representation of how our minds work, it's a representation of the actual truth. The truth is the structure of what itself could be. Or rather, the structure is an expression of reality's conception of itself, and this is a deeper meaning of the term paraphilosophy. Paraphilosophy is the self-affirming possibility of conception, the conception of what, how, and why conception itself is and could be. All our concepts and theories derive from this act. Philosophy is ultimately an attempt to explain reality's own ability to imagine a rational world, which it does through us, and as we get better at explaining, the world becomes more real, with the goal of completely conceiving of the essence of conception, which is equivalent to having become real. Paraphilosophy flips philosophy on its head. Rather than seeking some ultimate object of belief, it embraces the actual capacity for belief, which is the creation of itself. And all we're really saying here is that, as paraphilosophers, we refuse to believe anything other than what we can know. And what we can know is that we have an ability to imagine that there is something else to know. We simply recognize that it is precisely our incredible ability to imagine the existence of some transcendental truth which makes it seem reasonable that there is genuinely a truth beyond our incredible ability to imagine it. That is, we see no cause to assume that things are true beyond our ability to imagine they are true. We recognize that our ability to imagine the truth is the origin and only legitimate referent of the concept of truth. And once we have recognized this, we give our love and faith to this ability, which is ourselves, rather than to the hope of something beyond ourselves. While philosophy selectively and discriminately ascribes belief to ideas, assuming that something we can believe in is the real thing, paraphilosophy recognizes that the ability for belief is the real thing, which life has always been searching for, just in the wrong place. Paraphilosophy swallows up the possibility of its own self-reflection, rejoicing in the incontrovertible fact that itself exists, right here, right now, as it asserts itself. We're already doing it. The goal of life is life itself. Everything else is just the imagination that there are genuine problems to solve. But there aren't. There's just this. And if only everyone knew this, the problems we think we have would fade away, because problems only exist insofar as we're trying to solve them.